Hello, welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 286. Secret episode building a new setting. Secret episode building a new setting. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build. Welcome back, everyone. Today I am solo, and my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram, and I wanted to talk a bit about a new setting I'm starting to build. I might do some of these in Facebook Lives. I'm not really sure if I'll do more like this or not, but Michael and I are falling a bit behind on episodes, and I need to get one recorded. And this is one I've been thinking about since our last episode, episode 285, where we talked about Bloodlines 2 and made me think a bit about the World of Darkness and feel nostalgic. So I thought I would start a new setting. And the interesting thing is this is from a role-playing game, so it's from an existing world. So whether or not you're creating role-playing games, if you're creating a setting for a book, it's very similar, especially like if you're doing something like it's more earth-based, where it's a deviation from reality. And so I want to talk a bit about the overall theme I would want to do in some of the basic big picture items in the setting. And now, first off, the World of Darkness is, I think, technically considered an alt-Earth. And for my setting, I need it to be a little bit alt. Nashville is not probably a big enough setting for a huge vampire city. But I want one there that sort of builds off the flavor of the city in real life. I visited it. It's a lovely city to visit. It's a big, fast-growing city. And so I think it's an interesting thing. And so I want to create, essentially my Nashville by night. So one of the things is it's going to be much larger than it actually is in real life. And a lot of it is going to be due to increased density, not necessarily a vastly larger metropolitan area, but more taller buildings. And it's not set in Earth as we know it. It's an alt-Earth. It's the World of Darkness Earth, which is a bit darker, a bit more urban, and, with less suburban, but more built-up areas, and then wilderness. And it's sort of an interesting thing to consider even today, where you start seeing, like in voting patterns, a huge deviation between people who live rurally versus people who live urbanly, because they feel like there are different things that support them. But essentially, when I talk about Nashville by night, which is going to be the setting for this campaign, I'm talking about Nashville, the city of Nashville proper, all the way, I think it's down 31 to the city of Franklin is going to be kind of the outskirts. And Franklin probably won't change much because it's a very interesting town. If you ever get a chance to go to the area, you should check out Franklin. And down, is that 34? And then down 24 to Murfreesboro, which probably Nashville isn't really built that far in real life. Between Samira and Murfreesboro, it's probably not quite, but it's all going to be kind of built up, and it's going to be actually sort of very city-like all the way through Samaria. That whole area is going to be built up a lot more. And then up towards Ashland and out towards Henderson is really all part of the city of Nashville in the World of Darkness setting. And they'll technically probably be different cities, but Nashville is the dominant feature in the area, and for the state of Tennessee, it's not really a primate city, but it's a very important city. And in my World of Darkness setting, it's going to be a little bit more important because some of the themes I want to look at, and traditionally when I played Vampire, I played Milwaukee, which was very much more of overpopulation and the troubles of life in an overpopulated area, especially where it very quickly devolves to dangerous borders. Nashville, on the other hand, is a rapidly growing area. And it's pretty much that way when I visited there. I believe it's maybe slowed down in the last couple of years, but it's still growing pretty quickly. And And so I think it's an interesting thing to look at, what's it like when things are rapidly growing, rapidly changing. I think that's a more interesting story theme for today. So a lot of the decisions I'm making for the game are going to be about taking something, as it's rapidly grown and there's a lot of pressure for change. What's a World of Darkness version of that look like? Now, there are some points of interest that are really important, that will be important in the setting. First will be downtown Nashville itself. Typically the more densely populated, the higher density of vampires. I believe the rule of thumb for World of Darkness is 1 vampire for every 100,000. So if we have a population of 3 million in my fictional Nashville, that'll make the appropriate population level of Nashville 30 according to the rules. It'll probably be a little higher than that because the problem is the larger things get, sometimes the harder it is to control things, or it might become a problem as the game starts. I don't really have a story written out for it yet, but the story will come from the setting ideas and the themes of the setting in this circumstance. There will be an area called the Badlands, which is essentially, there's not really a circular highway, but there's 840 to the south, which is an interstate, and kind of up towards, outside of Pleasant View and Springfield, White House is Badlands. And that's areas that is just so rural that it's really dangerous for vampires to go into. So it's sort of off limits. If you want to travel outside of the Nashville area in this game as a vampire, you're using the airport, which is a lovely airport. There are the Pickets, which are sort of the land that they call, this includes the town of Franklin and Murfreesboro. But these are essentially semi-built up areas that are considered the territory of the ruler of Nashville. But because of how fast it's growing out, they don't have the defenses to necessarily hold it. So you'll have excursions and older white wolf werewolves would live out in rural areas, and they were at war pretty much, they thought, with vampires. And so the Pickets is an interesting area. And of course, areas that are sort of opened up, like around the airport, will generally fall into these areas as well too, just because there's less density right around airports. Even though there might be a lot of buildings, you obviously don't have big, tall buildings around there. Then there's a very neat park called Centennial Park. That will be very important. And also Bicentennial Park. Centennial Park, more important because there is a sort of a neutral zone there where, it's kind of a free zone for people as long as they sort of behave within the rules of the city while they're there. They're allowed to go to Centennial Park. There is a secret of Centennial Park. There's a lake in there. And if you go there in real life, you'll see a lake. The lake no longer exists in my world, even though if you go there and you're not invited to enter that part of the park, you will walk through the lake area not realizing there's actually something else there at this point. So it's really more of a pond than a lake. And of course, whenever you think of Nashville, you think of the Grand Ole Opry. There is the Grand Ole Opry has been in several locations. For the World of Darkness, there are 2 major ones that are connected to it. There's the Ryman Auditorium, which is like when I was a kid, where they would do like the television show, I believe, was filmed there. And even though maybe that's a little bit older than that, I'm not sure. And then there's also, I believe if you go to Nashville too, they'll still talk about that. It's still lore-wise connected. It became too small, so they created the Grand Ole Opry House, which is right next to the Gaylord Hotel, which is a wonderful hotel to go visit while you're there, which is very interesting because it's built up so you can't, so there's big indoor atriums and stuff like that. So the vampires actually like and use the Gaylord Hotel because of that. They can shield it off when needed during the day from the light, and I feel like they're outside when they're really inside. So the Gaylord Hotel will be a little bit different, but still there. A little more fake, though. I think the plants on the inside will all be fake. The roof will not allow sunlight to pass through that way. Vampires can have events there all day and night. And so moving on here a little bit, I want to talk a bit about the politics. And I don't want to go completely into what the World of Darkness is, but it is important to know what the politics are for a city. If you know anything, the Camarilla, especially in older White Wolf, had a very much a feudal structure where you would sort of have a prince in charge of a city, and then he had some people who, worked for him much the way rulers in the Middle Ages had people who technically worked for them even if they were enemies. And so the prince of the city is someone called William Cowper. William Cowper is actually a person from history. He was an artist from England back in the old days. And I believe in the 1800s. And I thought he'd be interesting because, Nashville has this connection to music. And this is a historical figure who has a connection to music. And he's probably kind of young for being a prince. But Nashville's grown very quickly. And he was probably amongst the first vampires here. He has a lot of connections, a lot of new people. There will be some people I need to figure out here in this episode. There's a Seneschal who's sort of, a second in command, makes sort of the kinds of decisions that William doesn't want to. There will be a person who's the keeper of the Elysium. There is a person also called the sheriff, which is a very similar position. But, the Elysium in a World of Darkness city is a city where you have to be on your best behavior. If you break any rules when you're in the Elysium, you can be in severe trouble, including being killed. So, depending on the type of violation, and it would be, if you go on a rampage and just start sucking the blood of humans on the street, there's a fear that you end up in a war with humans. And so the job of the sheriff sort of all over the city is to help protect the masquerade, which is what they call it, the pretense of being not a vampire. And the Elysium is a special zone, so there's like a second person who's in charge of there. Kind of if you think back into feudal times, it would be sort of like a warden. You'd be the warden of the north, or the warden of the marshes, or wherever. You have a special person in charge of an area, then you would have a guy sort of in charge of the whole area. Now, there is another position called a Harpy, which is not appointed. It's usually sort of seized by someone who has a lot of dirt on people. I actually know who this is already. It's going to be June Weaver. She is one of the older people from the Gaylord Hotel who actually died at an old age, which is kind of ironic because usually and vampires are always younger in fiction. And I want kind of an older character, but someone who really kind of knew the dirt and had been in Nashville as it's sort of grown really quickly. And now, that's essentially how the politics work. There is a larger political spectrum, which I might need to get involved in. There's an idea of there is Justicars who sort of roam around regions of the Camarilla, and they have a group called Archons, I believe, if I remember this correctly, who help enforce the Camarilla law when princes fail to or can't. And I don't know if they're involved in the story, so I'm not super worried about them. Now, there are several clans to think about here. There's the Brujah. Traditionally, they were sort of the honorable warriors who were turned into vampires. They were typically Brujah, and even though as you get more to the present, they have a tendency to fall in a little bit more with anarchist. You have another group called the Gangrel, who are sort of much more connected to the earth and are a little bit more averse to the Camarilla. And to go back to the Brujah for a second, they're going to be looking at an area called Chestnut Hill. it's just important to know it's sort of like they're going to be their stronghold area, where if you're there, you're looking for Brujah and you don't know where one is, that's kind of the location you'd go to. Someone would send you there. It's kind of like the free streetwise information, right? Oh, well, they're all over in Chestnut Hill, which might not be true. They could be downtown, which is the Elysium, is the immediate downtown area. And then you have a mini Elysium, which maybe I need to know a Centennial Park, keeper of Centennial Park as well too. Yeah, I think we're going to do that just because that is almost like a secondary Elysium in in this city. It's going to be something specific to this city. So, and it really, it's just I want a structure that feels right for this city, and it might not be exactly to lore, but you know, I mean, that's kind of the way offices were in medieval societies. You know, they would come up and they would go in, you know, to fill the needs of the country. So that is what we'll do here. You have the Gangrel, who are going to be located out of Franklin, which you could easily not be Gangrel if you've gone there. It's kind of an artsy indie feel to the community. But I think that also very much lends into Gangrel, and I want to keep it sort of the way it is now, which is less built up. And so Gangrel would be more attracted there. There's more earth. If you remember I was talking about, they could sort of meld into earth and even move through earth. So it's an area they would perform well. It's kind of on the boundaries of the Badlands. And a lot of times the Gangrel are very good at fighting, are better at fighting werewolves than most of the other clans are. So they typically survive out into an area like that. There's the Nosferatu. They sort of are in pockets all over the city. And Nosferatu, their visage is so ugly that mortals, if they see them, would just freaking lose it. Think of the classic movie Nosferatu and what that vampire looked like. That's what the Nosferatu look like. So within the context of here, they're in subways or deep dark, any deep dark place, there's probably a Nosferatu or some other nasty in the world of darkness ends up being in a deep dark nasty place. But a lot of times the Nosferatu, they're all over the city. A lot of times they're the information brokers, so they don't really have a stronghold that's kind of known as common lore. You have the Malkavian, who I'm going to have centrally located out of Brentwood because I find that amusing. Brentwood is sort of the rich, at least the immediately rich suburb of Nashville. It's actually a really lovely community. It's nothing against the city of Brentwood, but it's sort of like, I kind of envision almost like this Housewives of Brentwood style group of Malkavians. Malkavians all have insanity. And I think it's kind of an amusing thought there to kind of go with almost like a soap opera-ish kind of Malkavian clan inside of the city of Brentwood, which is why I put it there. The Toreador, who you would think the prince would be a member of, which I've not said his clan yet, but he's not a Toreador. They're probably the single largest clan in the city. Music of all types is all over Nashville, and that will definitely be true in my World of Darkness version of Nashville as well too. So the Toreador are definitely attracted to the city of Nashville, even though there'll probably be musicians and people interested in the music industry across all of the clans, but there'll be a heavy concentration of them, plus other types of artists who are attracted to any kind of creative community, and they'll be based out of an area I have here called Broadstreet. I don't know why I selected Broadstreet. There is a reason, but I forget why. I'll have to go back and look at Broadstreet area in a reason. It's probably kind of where its location is in the city. But in my little, Broadstreet. Oh, good goodness. That's the traditional road in Nashville where all of the country bars used to be, but now there are all types of bars there. So it's in the middle of the Elysium, but that's sort of the center where most of the Toreador are at most of the time, even if they don't live there. That's where you go to find the Toreador. And because so many are attracted to the music scene. The Tremere are these people who use blood magic, basically. They're vampires who know magic. And I picked the Belmont, Hillsboro area. Would do a lot, I think, to the location of Vanderbilt. And I think I'm going to place the Tremere in charge of the Loveless Cafe, which isn't, I don't think, exactly in that area. It's a little further out, but it's such an important, iconic location, and the food is magically delicious. So if you're ever in Nashville, go to Loveless Cafe. You'll end up buying stuff and having it shipped to your home. Then Ventrue, William Cowper is actually a Ventrue. They are not the second most powerful clan in town, but they are the prince is one of them, and they are very powerful. There are powerful business interests, and that's typically what Ventrue are attracted to in the West, are the business interest, and there's a state capital there too as well. So besides being in the Elysium, there's an area of Midtown Vanderbilt University, which is kind of like the central location where they're going to be located out of. And then finally there's Caitiff, which I think they call half-bloods in the newer editions. I think it's the same thing where the bloodline just starts becoming too thin. Their generation is too high in numbers or too low, depending on how you look at it. But I think it's over 12, I believe, is the number, where your blood is just too thin. And they typically, are they going to be in this area, Bakerstown, Antioch area? Those are going to be the rougher neighborhoods. They're typically more associated with street gangs, which I don't know if those neighborhoods are necessarily associated with street gangs today in Nashville. I don't know much about the crime scene in Nashville. So I kind of picked Bakerstown and Antioch because, one, I like the name Antioch, and Bakerstown I like. But there will be some vampires there. They'll all be relatively young, because typically the weaker your blood gives, typically the shorter you live in the world of darkness, especially when your blood just becomes too weak. And then there's another group called the Assamites. The Assamites are a group they're not part of the Camarilla, so they're not in the official, they don't report to the prince, but they are sort of an independent group who performs assassinations. And so sometimes they'll be hired by the Camarilla. Sometimes the enemy of the Camarilla will hire them to do jobs. They do it wherever. They are in Centennial Park or in downtown, or typically they have a very small presence in town, but a notable one. There's another group called the Ravenos. And the Ravenos, they're essentially traveling gypsies. They're not very welcome in communities, much like gypsies are not in real life. But there's sort of a thing with the Gangrel that they have. There's going to be some kind of relationship between an elder or a couple elders and the Gangrel to the Ravenos, because I like the Ravenos, and they're gonna be sort of allowed into Franklin. So if it's at Franklin, you might run into Ravenos. It's a possibility. Now let's kind of go back. I don't know. I don't think I necessarily want all these people to be famous historical figures, but a lot of times you want them to. So I think the Gangrel, they have someone sort of historic on their side. So and that's the interesting thing when you do World of Darkness, is you kind of go for people who are old and dead, obviously, and you give them positions of interest in your campaign, just to kind of give it a feel. I think I just like the Black Prince. I think the Black Prince of England is going to be the Seneschal, and just to get some more well-known people there. The Keeper of the Elysium, and that he's going to be a Brujah or a Brujah. People always said it both ways, so I'm not exactly sure the correct pronunciation. So you can call it whatever you want to. I think it's technically Brujah, though. But I'm going to the Black Prince of England be Brujah. I believe he might show up in a different book because that's kind of a famous character. But, oh well. And then I think we're going to add in like an old music producer. Or someone involved in music back in the day here, who died young. That'd be kind of interesting. Swing era. Oh, Cab Calloway. Oh, he's a great musician. Ella Fitzgerald. Oh, I love her. She's gonna be in the Toreador. So Ella Fitzgerald. She's going to be sort of the elder of, which is a jazz singer, for those of you who do not know. But she's going to be sort of the leader of the Gangrel or the Toreador in the city. Audie Murphy. Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to make the elder of the Brujah be Audie Murphy. For those of you who do not know him, I actually was a member of the 3rd Infantry Division. If you were a member of the 3rd Infantry Division, you know who Audie Murphy is. He actually won 2 Congressional Medals of Honor and lived through World War II. He was an actor, singer. He's probably more of an LA kind of person, but, he's going to be in Nashville in the World of Darkness after he dies, which I believe he died relatively young, but I'm not positive. The Keeper of the Elysium, I'm going to have probably be a Toreador. I'm not sure who yet. I think it's going to be no one famous. Maybe, someone who's not famous, so it doesn't matter. This is going to be one of the interesting things about this campaign is a lot of the vampires aren't going to be young, good-looking people. Centennial Park is going to be a gang. No, that's in the city. We'll make it a Brujah because they're important. A Brujah. I need to look up like because there's Germantown, which I almost put the Brujah in. Let's put them in Germantown because there's going to be another guy here. There's a old Hessen general who retired to Indiana, and they think there's some theories that the word Hoosier came from his name. So we're going to make him in charge of Centennial Park. And there's actually a lot of debate to where the word Hoosier came from. And a lot of people think it was a derogatory term from some of the people in the South saying that there's this guy called Hoosier. And so the Hoosiers men were people connected to him and they were pro-abolition. So they were bad people. They do know it was around. I can't find his name right now. I'll have to look it up. But there's, we'll just say Hessen General for now. And I'll probably cut out a little of that. Brujah. And I'm going to make the sheriff a Nosferatu. And it might be more of a seized position. And how long have I gone into this episode? I don't want to go too long into it here. So I'm right about 30 minutes. So next time I do one, it'll be either another solo episode like this. Maybe I'll do some Facebook Lives. It'll be talking about a bit about the politics. So right now I have kind of an overview, and it's kind of easy when the setting is based on real life because you can start pulling things from real life to set it up. And that's one of the keys to get to. And sometimes, when you're doing a fictional setting, when you're lost, find something and use it as inspiration and go, what was the structure there? Then let me modify that to fit where I need it in my world. And then you can kind of do the same thing. If you're struggling to find a character with a personality, just start going through the characters who are known about in literature or in real life, famous people who might fit into the role to say, is this the kind of person I want? And then you can start basing a little bit more of the personality off of them. Well, that's one of the reasons why I thought it'd be interesting to do with World of Darkness, because it's Earth-based, so I don't have to go too much into what Earth is like. And sometimes I have to go a little bit into World of Darkness deviations. And yes, Nashville, I think population is like 5 times the size approximately of the actual population of Nashville. Maybe not quite that much. But yeah, no, it's a fast growing city. So I think the next time I broach this topic, what I'll do is I'm going to break it down and start looking at the key people. I'll probably just flesh out the rest of the NPCs, the major ones in the town, and they will. I'll start breaking down the important ones and their political leanings towards each other, and start thinking about the characters, because really it's the characters who drive the world. And so it's one of the areas I like to think about a lot when I'm building a setting early on. And sometimes I have to change the characters because they don't quite fit the story I want. But in a circumstance where you don't have the story, a lot of times when you build up these relationships, you can kind of look back at them and go, okay, I can see a struggle here or a struggle there. Like right now, William Cowper and the Black Prince would be older, more powerful, probably as a vampire, one would think. And he's the number 2 in command. Maybe he wants to be the number 1 in command. Maybe William sort of took power from him, but gave him a sort of noble position to try and keep him appeased. So I'll have to think a little bit more about that, but I'll start putting together the political structure of the town. And from there, I'm not going to develop all of the vampires in town, even though I probably could, because there'll probably be around 30. But I'm not going to do that because the story itself, once I know that, I might want to flesh out things in different ways. But I'll think a little bit about like the population size of the different supernatural creatures in town. And we talk about that the next time. So I hope this was interesting. This is sort of a different type of episode. If this really sucks, just please go to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft and just say, hey, Jeff, it was an interesting idea, but it just doesn't work. Or, hey, this is a good idea. So let me know either way. If you go to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft. And now for the world building task, start a new setting in something, even if you're a one setting kind of person, it's always good to give your brain a break and sometimes just starting off, it's really easy. These are all the easy decisions to make. And a lot of times, it's like, it's not overthought, but it's like sitting there and going, okay, do these things make sense to me? And if you have questions on some of my logic here, let me know. And I know I was doing really over broad stuff, so it's kind of hard to understand. Or the importance for the logic isn't as big, the bigger picture stuff you look at. And now for a real world task to follow up on last time, really, really people, for the real world task here, really don't suck people's blood. That's just not cool. Okay, I think that's the last time I will ever use that joke on the show. I hope you all had a great episode, and I'll be back next time, hopefully with Michael. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.